learn to drive in life, the one thing you have to do is make a commitment to having driving lessons, and then you've got to spend a little bit of money on paying for the driving lessons. Well, if you want to learn how to cook, in a way the same thing applies. So welcome to part 2 of how to cook, and how to start off by spending a little bit of time and money on getting the right store cupboard. So we're going to kick off how to cook part 2 by me emptying out my store cupboard and showing you the kind of things that you need if you want to have a lifetime of interesting dishes. These are the kind of nucleus of ingredients that you need to have in your store cupboard if you want to cook more interestingly. And I'm not going to have time to mention each one individually, but I have written about each one. What I'm going to try and do is, as we go through how to cook, home in on some of these ingredients that we're going to be using in the recipes and explain why they should be in your store cupboard. First of all, I've got the baking group. We've got vanilla pods, vanilla extract, unrefined sugar, very important, and molasses, golden syrup and ginger, and we'll be talking more about ginger later. I suppose I have to warn you that this is the most expensive bit, because this is the booze. But I also think that some of these bottles actually don't cost a lot of money, because what's happening is you're just using a little bit here and a little bit there. It's not that expensive over a long period of time. Now we've got various spices, which we're going to be talking about in detail later on in this programme. But I also think buying whole spices and roasting them yourself is so much better than buying them ready ground or buying curry paste. Then we've got the Oriental group here, and we'll be looking at those in just a moment. Porcini mushrooms dried, they're in the store cupboard here. Olives, capers, lovely ingredient, capers, and you can have salted capers, which have a lovely strong sort of salty flavour, and you can have them preserved in vinegar, which is a milder flavour. But all these things are so important for getting flavour into your cooking. This you'll be familiar with. This is obviously Worcester sauce. We've got soy sauce, going to talk about much more about that in a moment. This is like the answer to the cook's prayer, because this is powdered vegetable bouillon, it's called, and always have that in your larder. Anytime you need stock, make a soup, there it is, instant. All you do is put it in hot water. Another good ingredient here is organic tomato ketchup. Has no sugar in it, unlike all the others that are sort of packed with sugar. This has no sugar, so it's really true to its tomato flavour. The good news is there are certain things you don't need, and over here I've got some of them. You know, you have this sort of designer ingredients now that are everywhere, and people sort of like to have them lying around the kitchen, and they look good, perhaps, but they're not really much use. I mean, you don't need herb vinegars because you can use herbs. You certainly don't need mango vinegar. And as for raspberry mustard, well, I don't think you need raspberry mustard. And what happens is, you know, people bring them back from their holidays and give you presents, and they sit in the back of the cupboard and just grow dust. So no designer ingredients, just pure, simple ingredients. And I'm going to start off by having a word about probably the most important 2 ingredients in cooking, certainly for me, and that is good old pepper and salt. And salt is up for discussion here, because you can buy sort of pouring salt, and that's all right, but it has chemicals in it to make it pour, and actually the salty flavour is a little bit bitter. If you want to have really good salt, which makes everything you cook, you know, taste better, then I would suggest you go for this. I think this is the best salt in the world, and it comes from not very far away from here, in fact, from Malden in Essex. It's sea salt, and being sea salt, it has this lovely extra sort of salty taste, so you can use less actually than you would if you were using the running salt. Now on the table, you can just take it between your fingers and crush it between your fingers like that over your food if you want to, or if you're making a salad dressing, you can crush it with a pestle and mortar. And I'd like to say that this is one of the most important bits of equipment for a cook. It won't cost you much money. You can see how strong it is. It's made of stone and it'll last you a lifetime. So a pestle and mortar, definitely essential. So we've got the salt. What about the pepper? Well, there's a lot more to pepper than you might have thought. These are peppercorns, black peppercorns, and I'll just show you those. They're a certain type of berry grown from a bush called Piper nigrum, and they're dried in the sun. And after they're dried, they have a black outer coating, which is very, very fragrant, and then they have an inner berry, which is very hot and fiery. So if you buy white peppercorns, what you've got here, these are white peppercorns, without the sort of fragrant outer part. And so therefore, I wouldn't recommend that you ever bother with white peppercorns, because if you have this type, the black peppercorns, you've got the fragrance on the outside, the fiery on the inside, and you've got a better flavour. And another very important bit to cooking is having a good pepper mill and a good salt mill. And I know there are many of you out there that have thrown away many of these because they simply don't do the job. So I want to show you these, which are excellent, and if you buy them like this, good quality ones, they will last you a lifetime. My first pepper mill and salt mill that I bought like this, I'm still using, so that's 30 years ago. Well, the idea behind having a well-stocked store cupboard is that you can rush home from work and cook yourself a really brilliant meal in about half an hour flat. That's what I'm going to show you now. This is a recipe for Thai noodles with shrimp. In Thailand they call it pad Thai. And the main ingredient are these. These are rice noodles. Sometimes they're called cellophane noodles. And they come in 3 different sizes. This is the medium size. You can get very thin thread noodles and you can get them slightly bigger. Then this ingredient here is dried shrimp. Now, if you ever bought a packet of frozen prawns and defrosted them and tasted them, there's no flavour there, is there? But shrimps have all the flavour of the sea. And when you dry them, you've got the concentrated flavour of shrimp. So it's just a wonderful ingredient, and you only have to use very little to get that marvellous sort of seafood taste. So dried shrimps, and then here is Thai fish sauce. If you think fish sauce sounds a bit ugh, then let me just take you back to Worcester sauce, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Worcester sauce is actually made from fish. It's made from fermented anchovies. And this is another version, an Eastern version, if you like, of Worcester sauce. It has all the authentic Thai flavour in it, which you want to get into this kind of dish. And also, it's quite salty, so you don't need to use salt. It sort of takes the place of salt. Now, these don't need to be cooked, these don't need to be cooked, but they do need to be soaked. So I'm just going to show you what happens. Here I've got 4 ounces of the noodles, and what I'm going to do is pour boiling water over them. And it's quite a convenient recipe, this, because what you do is you just let them soak for 10 minutes, same with the shrimps. I've got 2 tablespoons, 2 rounded tablespoons of dried shrimps there, and they're going to soak in boiling water for 10 minutes. So that gives you a chance to get everything else ready. Now really this is a kind of a stir-fried dish, and the secret of good, easy, hassle-free stir-frying is to have everything all lined up and ready to go before you start cooking. But since we've been doing How to Cook on television and you've all been writing to me, I've learnt that you need to see more than things being chopped going into the saucepan. Sometimes you need to know how they're prepared. So 2 ingredients I've got here are chilies and garlic. And I'm going to show you how to prepare them. First of all, garlic. Sometimes beginners don't even know what a head of garlic is. So a head of garlic is all the cloves all together, and a clove of garlic is one that you just take out. And then how to prepare that, the skin, the papery skin needs to come off, and you give it a good bash. Once you've given it a bash, the skin becomes loose and you can take the skin off very, very easily. Sometimes we put it through a crusher, but this is going to be chopped garlic, so all you do is slice it first, and then you just put the little slices like that, chop them with your knife into little pieces, and then when you've got it all, use your knife going across it to chop it really, really finely. So that's how to prepare a clove of garlic. Next we've got 2 chilies. What type of chili should you use? Well, you can have many, many chilies, and they've all got different temperatures, or if you like, the degrees of heat. But a good guide is that if you buy fat ones like this, they're milder. They've still got the kick, they've still got the piquancy, but they're milder. If you buy these, the thin ones, and they're called bird's eye chilies, which are used in Thai cooking a lot, then you know that these are going to be pretty fiery. So if you like it very fiery, you can use these. If you like it a little bit milder, use these. And how to prepare a chili? First of all, take the top off like that, this stalk, then cut it in half. And then you need to remove the seeds because the seeds are very fiery. I don't want that much fire. I mean, in some Thai dishes, they just use, 20 of those, seeds and all. But they're used to hotter food than we're used to. One word of warning, if you're ever preparing chilies, you have to be very, very careful to wash your hands after you've prepared them, because if you just happen to sort of touch your face and you've been preparing chilies, it can be quite painful. It can really sting. So there we are. Now we're just going to cut that into little strips, and then the little strips are going to be chopped finely, just the same as the garlic. So that's how to prepare chili and garlic. Right, everything else is ready. I'll tell you what it is as it goes into the pan. First of all, in the pan, I've got 3 tablespoons of ground nut oil, and that's been heating gently here, and I'm just going to turn the heat up high now. And in Thailand, they'd be using a special Thai wok, which is not like a Chinese one. It's sort of round with double handles. I'm just going to use an ordinary saucepan here. It's difficult to use a wok if you haven't got a really good gas flame. Swirl the oil round, and then the first thing that goes in is the chili. 2 chilies, like the one I showed you, the mild one. 2 chilies. 2 cloves of garlic. And the onions, so they all go in together, and then they'll need about a minute in the hot pan to a minute and a half until the onion begins to look tender. Then the next ingredient is the soaked dried shrimps. And here, in this little pot, these are frozen tiger prawns that have been defrosted, and I've just chopped them into little pieces. And you can see as they go in, they look sort of lovely, translucent blue they look. And then in 2 minutes, what will happen is that they'll turn a lovely, juicy prawn pink colour. I just love watching that blue turn into pink while I'm cooking. It's really nice. So they're all lovely and ready to go. And what we now need to add is, first of all, 2 tablespoons of Thai fish sauce. And then I'm going to use the juice of a lime. And I love using this now. This is one of my favourite bits of equipment, where you just stick that into the lime and turn it round. You need a nice, large, juicy lime for this. And then all the juice comes pouring out. And once the fish sauce goes in, you're in Thailand. You can smell Thai cooking. That's that. Now I'm going to go and get my soaked noodles. After they've been soaked in hot water, you put them straight into cold water and drain them. And here they are. If you don't put them in cold water straight away, they go all claggy. But these are nice and loose, so in they go next. And then I'm just going to stir those around a little bit to get all those other ingredients and flavours mixed into them. And then the final ingredient that's going to go into the main part of this dish, there is a garnish, but the final ingredient is 2 beaten eggs. Now what you do is, you beat the eggs up and then you pour them in. And those of you who are with me on part 1 will remember, when you make an omelette, you pour the egg in the pan and you just shake it around a bit and leave it to settle for about 1 minute. And then after a minute, you can start to stir and the little flakes of egg will begin to appear. Now we've got a garnish for this, and the garnish is 3 ingredients. First of all, I've got 2 ounces of unsalted roasted peanuts. I've got 2 spring onions that have been finely chopped, but you use all the green part as well, you don't trim them, and 2 heaped tablespoons of fresh coriander. Now half of that is going to go in now, like that, and half of that begins to look very colourful now, and half of that. 1 brief stir, and this is now ready to serve. So what you need to do is have ready a hot serving plate, if you're going to serve it on a serving plate. There we go. Onto the plate go the noodles, like that. And then, finally, the rest of the garnish gets sprinkled on the top. So you've got some crunch with the peanuts, and you've got the lovely flavour of chopped spring onions, and then finally the coriander leaves. And that is pad Thai, or Thai noodles with shrimps. English mustard is the one and only British spice. But it needs to be treated carefully. You have to mix it with cold water and leave it aside for about 10 or 15 minutes to really develop its kick. This is a recipe using 2 mustards. The first one is English mustard powder, and the second one is whole grain mustard. Prepare 1 pound of lamb's kidneys by cutting them in half horizontally with a sharp knife. Then, using kitchen scissors, cut out the white core and then peel off the outside skin. Fry the kidneys for 3 minutes, turning halfway through. Then remove them from the pan, add the onion and then the mushrooms. When the juices begin to run, stir in 3 fluid ounces of dry white wine and reduce the wine before adding a teaspoon of mustard powder and 2 heaped teaspoons of grain mustard. This is a 200 ml tub of creme fraiche. Add this to the sauce, season and stir everything thoroughly, then keep on reducing the mixture until it's reduced by half. Finally, return the kidneys and their juices to the pan, stir again, and then heat through for about 1 minute before serving. This will be enough for 2 or 3 people. Well, one of the essential ingredients for a well-stocked store cupboard is having spices. Lovely, fragrant, exotic spices that have been coming here from around the world for centuries. But I need to give you a tip on spices. Whenever possible, buy whole spices. Don't buy them ready ground, because once they're ground, they lose their fragrance and flavour very, very quickly. Some spices you have to buy ground because they don't come whole. But the rule is, whenever they do come whole, try and seek them out and find them. And one of the best ways to find them actually is in Oriental or Indian shops, and they're also much less expensive if you buy them that way too. Now, to show you a recipe using spices and how to deal with them, I'm going to show you my version of an Indian type recipe called meat do piazza. Do piazza means double onions. But first of all, what I'm going to do is show you how to deal with whole spices when you're using them for cooking. Now, what I've got here is a little selection of whole spices. This here is coriander seeds. This one here is fennel seeds, and this one is cumin seeds. This one is called fenugreek. If you can't get it whole, you'll have to buy it ground, but you can hunt around and get it whole if you look hard enough. And these are cardamom pods. And the way to deal with them is to preheat a frying pan over a medium heat, no oil, nothing like that. Measure out your spices, the ones you're going to need, and then just put them into the frying pan and toss them around a bit. And then you need to leave them there, don't go away, and watch them for about 1 or 2 minutes, and they start to change colour. And also you begin to get the fragrance, you know, it just hits you, this wonderful mixture of exotic fragrances. And sometimes when they get hot, they start to sort of move about, and sometimes they jump a little bit. I can just hear them just beginning to sort of peak. But be careful, don't go away, don't leave them too long because you don't want them to burn. Then, having brought them back to life by roasting them, you then put them into your pestle and mortar, which we've already talked about, like that. And then just go in heftily and crush them. And I had a letter when I did part 1. Remember we made an egg curry? I had a letter from somebody saying, why did you make me go out and spend all that money and have to go to the bother of roasting and grinding spices? Why couldn't I just use a good curry paste? Well, the reason is that if you're going to cook something exotic, then you need to have as much flavour as you can get. There's no point in cooking unless you get the maximum amount of flavour. And whole spices will last for about a year. So just keep going on like that until they're ground to a fine powder, and then you can use them to put in your curry.
The curry we're making today begins with garlic, fresh ginger and green chillies. And the stars we're using from the spice cupboard are cardamom pods, coriander, cumin, fennel seeds and pre-ground fenugreek powder, and lastly turmeric. This is called curried beef doppiazza, and doppiazza means double onions. So you need a pound of onions sliced like this into half moon shapes. Begin by browning the onions and then add the garlic and chilli and cook for a few minutes. Next, add 2 pounds of chuck steak, which has been cut into cubes, and browned a few pieces at a time first. Stir the beef into the onions, then add the crushed spices with the turmeric, fenugreek, ginger, and 2 medium tomatoes skinned and chopped. Now another store cupboard ingredient. This is 3 ounces of creamed coconut, which is grated and combined with hot water. Add this to the curry, along with 5 fluid ounces of natural yogurt, stir, and then let it all simmer really gently for 2 hours. Then just before it goes to the table, add the juice of a fresh lime, a tablespoon of coriander leaves, serve with basmati rice and some coriander chutney.
Now I'm going to show you the easiest, most exotic and quickest recipe I know, and this is called Oriental pork casserole. You start off with a large casserole, and in it I've got 2 pounds of shoulder of pork cut up into 1-inch cubes, and it must be British pork of course, and that's just been put in a single layer in the base of the casserole. So it goes straight in. Then we're going to make a sauce, and we're into our store cupboard for 2 very important store cupboard ingredients. This is soy sauce, and I want to tell you something about this. Try and get Japanese soy sauce if you can, because it's the best in the world. And this one here is a Chinese ingredient, rice wine. And this wine is made from rice, and if you find there is a choice in the shop of white or the darker one, always get the darker one because that's the best. Now I've got 4 fluid ounces of both of those in my jug here, and this is going to have some more ingredients added. First of all, ginger. And fresh ginger, you might be a bit afraid of that if you've never used it, looks like this, rather uninviting and knobbly. And all you do is you just take a piece off. You don't keep it in the store cupboard, you keep it in the fridge actually, in a polythene bag. Take a piece off, just peel it as you would peel a potato, and then it looks like that. And then for this recipe it's going to be grated. So I want to show you this grater here, which is very, very good for ginger, very efficient. And then you just grate it on the grater, and what we need for our recipe here is a heaped tablespoon altogether. But I just wanted to show you how very easy ginger is to deal with. But here's my tablespoon, which somebody has kindly already measured out for me. So that goes in to join the soy sauce and the rice wine. Next, we've got a small onion that's finely chopped. That goes in. This is molasses sugar, unrefined sugar, and I've got a dessert spoon. And then I've got 2 cloves of garlic, which have been crushed. And I've got 2 chillies, which we saw how to prepare a few moments ago, chopped small. Told you how easy it was. All you do now is you give that a good whisk, and then you just simply pour it over the pork. So there's no browning, nothing like that. That just gets poured over the pork as evenly as possible. And then you turn the heat on, bring it up to simmering point, but we've got 2 more ingredients from the store cupboard again. This one is cinnamon, whole cinnamon sticks, so I'm going to put 2 of those in. And then this is a lovely Chinese spice. This is called star anise, and it's shaped like a star, as you can see, and each petal holds a little seed, and the seed, during the cooking, releases a lovely sort of aniseed flavour. You'll soon have your kitchen smelling like a Chinese restaurant when you make this. So in that goes, put the lid on, and then it's cooked for just 1.5 hours, and you can go away and forget all about it. But you come back halfway through, turn the pieces of meat over, and then finish the cooking time. And after 1.5 hours cooking, this is what it looks like, and the smell, the aroma that comes from it is just absolutely tantalising. So here we are, Oriental pork casserole. I think it's nice with Thai sticky rice and stir-fried green vegetables. Then there's finally just a little garnish of shredded spring onion and a little tiny bit of shredded chilli. I never seem to have enough time to show you all I want to show you, but there is enough time for you to just have a little peep at 1 or 2 more store cupboard recipes. Now we're looking at some of the sweet things in the store cupboard. This is stem ginger. It's one of my favourites. It lasts for ages, and it's the basis of lots of wonderful recipes. Golden syrup is an old favourite, brilliant in winter puddings. And there's also honey here, or maple syrup, which we used in the first series. Now we have unrefined sugars, light demerara and various shades of dark brown to thick molasses sugar. And if you want unrefined syrup, this is thick, dark, pure molasses. I do hope you'll try this recipe using some of the ingredients. It's a light, moist, preserved ginger cake with a sharp, lemony icing. Now we're back to savoury recipes, and this is called anchoyade, a lovely snack from Provence to serve on baked croûtes of bread. It's a mixture of crushed anchovies, olives, onion, garlic and tomatoes with oregano, marjoram and parsley. This is a recipe from the Caribbean. Thick pork chops, served with a wet jerk seasoning, which is made with spices and molasses. And to go with them, I've prepared this pineapple salsa, which gives a lovely sweet edge to complement the kick of the pork. Well, now we really have run out of time, but I'm going to be back next week, and I hope you'll be back too. This time it's how to cook fish, and we've got butterflied prawns in garlic butter, herrings that are simply fried in oatmeal, and a very luxurious smoked fish pie. Why is it, do you think, that we live in a group of beautiful islands surrounded by the sea that we don't actually eat enough fish? Well, over the years I've been writing recipes and doing television programmes and receiving lots of letters. I think the main reason is fear. We want to eat fish when we're in restaurants, but we're afraid of cooking it, afraid of handling it and all that goes with cooking it. Now, why are we afraid? I think there's some kind of myth that was propagated years ago when people landed fish straight from the sea and it had to be gutted and scaled, and all that is terrifying. But nowadays we live in the age of modern fishmongers. They will do all the work for you. It doesn't need a lot of handling at all. And don't forget that, in my opinion, fish is the 21st century food. It's got everything going for it that we want in the modern diet. It's low in fat for the most part, and probably the best reason for buying and cooking fish is that you can have supper on the table in probably about 10 minutes and at the most 30 minutes. Now, I've got half an hour to convince you now not to be afraid. I'm going to start by explaining to you what the various groups of fish are and how they're going to cook and eat. I think the best way for a beginner to approach the subject of cooking fish is to divide the various fish into families so that we can define their textures. The first family of fish contains probably the ones that we're most familiar with, cod and haddock, which you can recognise by the black stripe along the side. And these come under the heading of firm and flaky, and when you cook the flesh, it's quite firm to eat and it separates out into segments. And in this group also are two other fish, one whiting and the other hake. This is the firm and meaty family, firstly turbot and halibut, which have much more bite and can stand up to more vigorous cooking. Also in this firm and meaty league are monkfish tails. Then we come to the more delicate fish. This is plaice with delicate soft flesh and a lovely flavour. Delicate fish are usually flat, and lemon sole, Dover sole or skate come into this category. Now, as a complete contrast, these are oily fish with lots of gutsy flavour. This is a family that starts with the tiny whitebait and goes up through to the sardine and the herring and right up to the mackerel with its beautiful iridescent skin. Salmon and sea trout are also oily fish, but both have a distinctive pinkish flesh. The salmon is known as the king of the sea, and caught wild in the early spring. I would absolutely agree with that. Well, if you'll forgive the pun, we're going to plunge right in at the deep end, and I'm going to tackle, first of all, perhaps the most frightening fish of all, and that's the herring. Now, I've got a little campaign going about herrings because I can't understand why everybody goes mad for sardines from the Mediterranean that have to be frozen and shipped over, and they sometimes ignore this wonderful fish called the herring that's fished in our own waters, and it belongs to the same family. Now, what's good about a herring is you get more for your money because they're much juicier, they're bigger, and they're fatter. And the thing they've all got in common, those four fish, is they have lots of lovely gutsy flavour, and that's why I'm campaigning for them. So now I hope I'm going to take the fear away and show you how to deal with a herring. First of all, a good fishmonger will prepare it for you. He'll gut it, he'll remove the scales, take the head off. We want the tail on, I'll tell you about that in a minute. And then when you get it home, if the guts have been removed from the top here, you might need to just slit the belly open with a pair of scissors. And then there's a fin here that needs to be snipped off with the scissors. Then the next thing you do is you put your herring like that onto a board so that it's sitting sort of upright, and there's another little fin here that's going to come off and another one here that's going to come off. And then, having sat it upright on your board, you then need to flatten it out. Now, you can use a rolling pin, but I think it's okay just to use your fist and give it a few hefty bashes, so we'll do that. There we are. Now when we've done that, the next thing we need to do is find the backbone with our hand, with the fingers, like that. And you can feel it, and then you press the backbone with your fingers all the way along. Now we're going to turn it right way up, and then you can see the bone, the backbone here, the beginning of it. You can take a little knife if it'll help you, and then you just pull. And what happens is the backbone comes away, and all the little bones coming off it will come away as well. And any that you've missed, you can just pull out with your fingers like that, or you can take eyebrow tweezers. That's sometimes helpful, removing all the rest of the little bones. Now there's a row of bones here that have been under the sort of tummy flap, and we don't need those. So we're going to cut those away with the scissors, like that. And do the same on the other side, like that. Now the recipe I'm going to show you, you could of course fold it up like that, make some cuts in it, and it's very nice on the barbecue. But I'm going to show you today a traditional Scottish recipe, which is herring fried in oatmeal. And what happens to the herring is you wash it, dry it very carefully with some kitchen paper, season it, and then you dip it first into flour, then into beaten egg, and then into this lovely ingredient, which is coarse oatmeal. And you'll find coarse oatmeal is available at health food and whole food shops. And what I've done here is it's got flour on this side, but on this side it's got the coarse oatmeal. And what that does is it gives it a lovely crusty, crunchy crust when you eat it. And all that's going to need now, which I think is ready, is a hot frying pan. And in Scotland, they always traditionally fry herring in oatmeal in lard, but I'm using lard here, but if you don't want to use lard, you can use a flavourless oil like ground nut oil, but it must be very hot when the fish goes in to get it nice and crispy. And then that will actually need turning over halfway through. I always think it's best to drain fish when it's been fried on crumpled greaseproof paper, and that is going to be served with perhaps a bit of lemon or lime to squeeze over, although I actually like on herrings, I actually like good old malt vinegar. But anyway, I've got an accompaniment here for you, and this is a beetroot relish. Well, speaking of fish and the fear factor, I think probably one of the most fearful fishes to cook is skate. People are afraid of it. But I have to reassure you about skate because, first of all, it does have the most wonderful flavour. It's a really, truly superb fish. And so if I can take the fear away from you, I will. It has lovely meaty flesh that sort of comes off in shards. But first of all, you can cook it, either steam it, grill it, but I like it fried, just dusted with a little bit of seasoned flour first. Well, what every decent bit of fried fish needs is a homemade tartar sauce. One of the things that I think is really disgusting is that kind of factory-made tartar sauce that comes in little sachets. Sometimes it's nice to taste the real thing. And the good news is you can make tartar sauce homemade in very, very few minutes. So we start off with a food processor. You're going to have a food processor, of course, if you're going to do it quickly. And into the processor, first of all, goes one large egg. And then along with the egg, I've got 1 clove of garlic. I'm going to use half a teaspoon of mustard powder and half a teaspoon of sea salt. And then I'm going to put the lid on the processor, switch on and blend those together. And then this is also a recipe for quick mayonnaise, so you could just have it as mayonnaise if you wanted to, but we're going to make tartar sauce. The next thing you need is 6 fluid ounces of light olive oil, or you could use ground nut oil or grapeseed oil. You don't want a lot of flavour in the oil. And all you do now is you let the oil drizzle very slowly. It's good to use one of these because you can make it as slow as possible if you've got one of these oil cans. And let it drip very, very slowly, and it'll take about 2 minutes. So you can sit down, you can start the crossword, you can just switch off for 2 minutes while you pour it in. Right, then we can switch off, and I had it running on quite a slow speed there. You might have to taste to check the seasoning, and you will need to have some freshly milled pepper in there. But now we're going to add lots of other goodies, some lemon juice, and these are 2 more store cupboard ingredients. You know, we were in the store cupboard last week. This is salted capers, and these are cornichons. And cornichons, don't confuse them with gherkins, because gherkins are a little bit sharp. But cornichons are crisper and better, and they're very widely available now. So, in go a tablespoon of capers, and they've been rinsed under the tap to get rid of the salt. And then 4 cornichons, and this is a tablespoon of parsley. And what they're going to now, what's going to happen to them now, is we're going to chop them with the processor by switching it to a pulse movement. And then it's quite fun to just stand back and watch it chop. Now you can have it very finely chopped, or you can have it chunky. I'm of the chunky school myself. And then off. I just want you to just have a look at that now. I'm going to take the blade out first. And it couldn't be quicker, it couldn't be easier, and that is homemade tartar sauce. Keep it in a screw-top jar in the refrigerator, and it will keep for up to a week. And here we have our beautiful piece of golden fried skate, our lovely homemade tartar sauce, which you've just seen. The skate will take about 4 minutes on each side, and the sauce, as you saw, will probably take about 4 minutes from start to finish. But, as promised, I'm now going to show you why you shouldn't be afraid of eating skate. All you do is you just take your knife and just slide the flesh away from the bones like this. There's that beautiful flesh. See how easily it comes away? It just slides away. There's no need to be worried. Then you turn it over and eat the flesh off the other side. So I hope I've taken your fear away, and I do hope you're going to try frying skate.
This beautiful dish here is char-grilled tuna with a warm coriander and caper vinaigrette. Fresh tuna has a lovely meaty texture, all of its own, not like any other fish. To cook it, preheat a top of the stove char grill until it's very hot. You'll need to preheat it for about 10 minutes. Then brush the tuna steak on both sides with olive oil and season each side with salt and pepper. Now put the tuna on the hot grill and give it 2 minutes on each side to get that lovely charred ridge pattern. Meanwhile, take the juice of a fresh lime and a crushed clove of garlic, combine them in a bowl with the grated zest of the lime, add a heaped tablespoon each of capers, chopped coriander leaves and a chopped shallot. Then add 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, 1 of white wine vinegar and 1 heaped tablespoon of grain mustard. Mix all this very thoroughly and heat gently in a saucepan before pouring over the fish before serving.
Now, still in the mode of how easy it is to cook fish, we're going to move on and cook some fish in the oven this time. And the recipe I want to show you is for oven roasted fish with potatoes and salsa verde. And the fish we're using is cod. And as I mentioned earlier on, people are afraid of fish, they're afraid of handling it. But in this day and age, it's quite easy now to just buy fish that's already prepared for you. And we're using 1 pound of cod in this recipe. And here we have a pound of cod that was bought, ready skinned. All I've had to do there is just cut it into chunky pieces. But if for any reason you find yourself with a piece of fish that's still got the skin on and you want to take it off, then it isn't that hard, so I thought I'd show you. If you've got a piece of fish this big, cut it in half first to make it a bit easier. Get rid of 1 piece. And then what you do is you look at the skin at the end of the fish here, make a small cut with your knife, and then using all of your fingers, but angling them that way because you don't want to cut them, you just slide the knife along the fish and just ease it off the skin and it'll come away. I hope you can see just how easy that is. Now for our recipe, we're going to start by making the salsa verde. And the first thing it needs is garlic. And I want to show you how to crush a clove of garlic with a pestle and mortar and salt. The recipe's got 1 clove, and we're going to use a level teaspoon of salt. If you've got a garlic crusher, you can use that, but this is perhaps a better way. I find this is the way I mostly crush garlic now, because most recipes have salt in them. You start giving a few hefty bangs, like that, and then you just work it quite vigorously, and you'll find that very quickly, in a couple of